I'm calling the police right now. Constance Blackwell screamed from her driveway, phone pressed to her ear, face red with fury, jabbing a finger straight at me. I just smirked and kept loading boxes into the moving truck. For what? Packing up my own stuff and leaving? 8 months. 8 months of pure HOA hell. $200 fines for the wrong shade of beige on my mailbox. Citations for excessive glare from my solar lights. 17 ridiculous violations total, including her wild claim that my IKEA patio furniture was now permanent community property belonging to the neighborhood. Sirens wailed in the distance. Constance crossed her arms, smug as hell, convinced this was her ultimate victory. What she had absolutely no idea about, what she couldn't have imagined in her worst nightmare, was that while she was busy dialing 911 to report a man legally packing his own belongings, he already owned her house. Welcome to the HOA files. I'm Xavier Finley, 52, retired Army logistics officer. And this is the story of how one power-hungry HOA president accidentally handed me the keys to her entire kingdom. Drop your worst HOA nightmare in the comments and tell me what state you're watching from. Does yours top this? 3 months earlier, I'd rolled into Maple Ridge Drive with nothing but a U-Haul, my military pension, and a dream of quiet retirement. Xavier Finley, recently divorced, looking for a fresh start in suburbia after 20 years of moving military families around the globe. I'd chosen this neighborhood specifically, 12 houses on a dead-end street built in the 70s, the kind of place where your biggest worry should be whether the Johnson's barbecue smoke drifts over your fence. Then I met the neighborhood's self-appointed dictator. Constance Blackwell appeared at my door within an hour of the moving truck's arrival. Picture this, 58 years old, retired bank manager who'd spent 8 years transforming our voluntary HOA into her personal empire. Silver hair so rigidly styled it could survive a Category 5 hurricane. Always dressed like she was heading to foreclose on a children's hospital. She thrust a 47-page HOA handbook into my hands with a smile that could freeze molten lava. Welcome to Maple Ridge. I'm Constance, your HOA president. Just wanted to ensure you understand our expectations. That handbook was a masterpiece of bureaucratic terrorism. Grass height regulations down to the quarter inch. 17 approved mailbox styles with specific installation requirements. Paint colors with names like Sanctioned Beige No. 3 and Approved Cream No. 7. Even garbage can rules, not visible before 6 p.m. on collection day, stored away by 8 a.m. the following morning. We maintain the highest standards here, she said, pale blue eyes studying me like I was a cockroach in her kitchen. I trust that won't present difficulties for someone of your background. The way she said background made my jaw clench. Military training teaches you to recognize subtle hostility. This woman was broadcasting it in surround sound. Trouble started immediately. Professional movers accidentally clipped a sprinkler head in the grass strip between sidewalk and street. Maybe $12 worth of damage. I offered to replace it on the spot. Constance materialized from her house like a perfectly coiffed missile. That's community property. Destruction of HOA assets requires formal documentation and city notification. I replaced the sprinkler that afternoon, bought a better model, installed professional-grade fittings, even landscaped around it. 3 days later, destruction of community property. $500 fine payable within 10 business days. For a $12 sprinkler head. That night, tasting bitter coffee and reading HOA bylaws until 2 a.m., I started researching. The original 1974 neighborhood charter showed voluntary membership. Constance had spent 8 years adding restrictions, each amendment tightening her stranglehold on the community. But here's what gave me hope. Dorothy Weinstein, the 74-year-old widow next door, knocked on my door with homemade cookies and a knowing smile. "Don't let her intimidate you, honey," Dorothy whispered, glancing toward Constance's house. Some of us have been waiting years for someone to fight back. Game on. The second violation arrived exactly 1 week later, hand-delivered at 7 a.m. sharp. Improper grass variety. Our covenant allegedly required pure Kentucky bluegrass. My lawn contained fescue, creating an uneven aesthetic that diminishes property values. She'd had it professionally tested by something called premium turf analysis, which sounded about as legitimate as a degree from Trump University. Fine. $50 initial violation plus $25 per day until corrected. Full lawn replacement, roughly $8,000, for grass that looked identical to everyone else's. That's when military training kicked in. When someone's lying about the small stuff, they're definitely lying about the big stuff. I grabbed my camera and spent an afternoon documenting every lawn on Maple Ridge Drive. What I found was beautiful. Dorothy's lawn was 40% clover, gorgeous white patches she'd cultivated for decades. The Hendersons had wildflower borders that attracted butterflies. And Constance's own prize-winning front yard featured a deliberate border of Dutch clover that violated her own grass purity obsession. I spent the next week building a case file that would make a prosecutor weep with joy. 17 different violations across 11 houses, including our HOA presidents. Then I found the smoking gun buried in 2019 meeting minutes. Constance had changed the grass requirements without proper approval. Original bylaws required 8 homeowner votes for landscape amendments. Her grass rule passed with 5 attendees, including herself. Completely illegal. But while I was building my grass case, I noticed something else in those financial records. Payments to premium turf analysis and various consulting companies, all registered to people with Constance's last name. She wasn't just enforcing random rules. She was profiting from neighbor harassment. I compiled everything into a 15-page report and distributed copies to every house simultaneously. The reaction was immediate and glorious. Dorothy called first, laughing so hard I worried she'd pull something. "Honey, you just kicked the hornet's nest with a steel-toed boot." The Hendersons knocked by afternoon, grinning like lottery winners. "We've been waiting 5 years for someone with actual backbone. Did you know she tried fining us for incompatible rose colors? Apparently red roses next to pink ones create visual discord." By evening I'd recruited a small rebellion. 4 families ready to challenge Constance formally, 2 more willing to testify about harassment, and Dorothy organizing what she called Project Wildflower, deliberate violations planted in coordinated protest. The cherry on top came from public records. Constance's mortgage was 3 months delinquent. Her escalating violation fees weren't about neighborhood standards. They were about funding her lifestyle while her own finances crumbled. While I was documenting her grass hypocrisy, Constance filed complaints with the city about my illegal business operations. My pickup truck still had old contracting logos from before retirement, and she claimed I was running a construction company from my garage. City inspector came out, found 0 violations, and noted in his report that complainant appears to be filing frivolous claims. Now I had documented proof of harassment escalation. Then came the boundary dispute. A notice from something called Meridian Property Solutions claimed my backyard shed encroached 18 inches onto designated HOA common area, the same shed I'd built 3 months ago, perfectly positioned on my own property. While she manufactured this fiction, she escalated to physical sabotage. 3 contractors showed up claiming to maintain the common area behind my house. I watched from my kitchen window as they systematically destroyed my fence posts and severed my sprinkler lines, with Constance directing operations from her driveway, arms crossed, that satisfied smile spreading across her face like poison. What she didn't know was that I'd been expecting exactly this move. 2 weeks earlier I'd installed a professional security system. Motion sensors, night vision cameras, cloud backup storage. Every moment of her property destruction was recorded in crystal clear detail, complete with audio of her instructing workers to remove all unauthorized structures. I didn't confront her. Military training teaches patience. Cornered animals make predictable mistakes when you let them think they're winning. Instead, I ordered the original 1974 survey plat for Maple Ridge Drive. $200, and 3 days later, I was spreading yellow documents across my kitchen table like treasure maps. The original neighborhood development showed private lots extending to rear fence lines with only utility easements for power and water access. No common areas. No shared spaces. No HOA land ownership anywhere. Constance had been collecting maintenance fees for 8 years to care for property that didn't exist. But the real revelation came from researching recent property sales. 3 houses had already gone into pre-foreclosure, all connected to the same pattern. The Martinez family had been driven out after Constance's harassment about their teenager's basketball noise escalated to false CPS reports. They'd accepted the first offer that came, from Danny Meridian's company, 20% below market value. Danny Meridian. Constance's brother-in-law. The scam was elegant in its cruelty. Target vulnerable families with harassment campaigns. Manufacture violations and fines. Pressure them into financial distress. Then swoop in with below-market offers through shell companies. Flip the properties at full value. Pocket the margins. 11 families destroyed over 3 years. Profit per house ranging from $40,000 to $80,000. Sitting in the courthouse basement surrounded by the musty smell of old documents, I felt something shift inside my chest. This wasn't about HOA harassment anymore. This was about justice for families whose lives had been systematically destroyed by organized fraud. The breakthrough came from what I thought was a rookie mistake. I accidentally typed Blackwell into the public records database instead of my own address. The screen displayed a list that made my coffee taste like liquid gold. Mortgage records, lien filings, foreclosure notices. Constance Blackwell was financially dead in the water. $340,000 owed on a house assessed at $280,000. A second mortgage for $60,000 on something called Elegance Catering Solutions, apparently her failed post-retirement business venture. Our HOA dictator was broke as a church mouse. And the bank holding her mortgage was First National, the same institution that had foreclosed on the Martinez family and 2 other Maple Ridge properties. I made a phone call that afternoon that changed everything. First National Loan Services? I represent Maple Ridge Investments LLC. We're interested in acquiring distressed mortgage debt in the Maple Ridge Drive area. The loan officer's voice perked up immediately. Are you familiar with the Blackwell property? We've been looking for qualified investors to help resolve that situation. 20 minutes later, I had preliminary approval to purchase Constance's entire mortgage debt for 70 cents on the dollar. The scope of what I was now planning was insane. Buy every house on Maple Ridge Drive except Constance's, then purchase her mortgage debt and foreclose on her personally. Total cost, roughly $2.8 million. Total satisfaction, priceless. That's when Dorothy mentioned her son Michael. 38 years old, successful contractor, and angrier than a hornet in a paint mixer about Constance's 8-year harassment campaign against his mother's bird feeders. She tried to fine Mom for excessive wildlife attraction, Michael explained, settling into my kitchen chair. For feeding cardinals. Who the hell finds somebody for feeding birds? I spread my acquisition plan across the table like battle maps from D-Day. Want to help me buy her house out from under her? Michael's expression shifted from curiosity to something approaching religious enlightenment. How much are we talking? My attorney Patricia Wong reviewed the contracts with the enthusiasm of someone discovering a spectacular legal train wreck. Is it illegal? No. But will it destroy Constance's real estate scam? A pause that stretched longer than a military funeral before she finally grinned. If you can coordinate simultaneous closings without her discovering the pattern, this would be the most expensive neighborhood acquisition in county history. And completely legal. The timeline was brutal. 14 days to close on 11 properties while maintaining operational security that would make the CIA proud. Each purchase required separate shell companies. Ridge Investment Holdings, Maple Street Properties, Drive Development LLC. Delaware Incorporation for privacy, local banking relationships, coordination between law firms that thought I'd suffered a psychotic break. Dorothy proved invaluable as my neighborhood intelligence coordinator. She knew which families were secretly ready to escape Constance's tyranny, which properties had hidden foundation problems, and most importantly, when our target would be vulnerable. Constance visits her sister in Florida every month, Dorothy reported during one of our morning coffee briefings. Third Thursday through Sunday. She'll be gone during your closing weekend. Constance's financial panic reached full meltdown when she tried to have my house condemned over a tomato garden. The emergency structural safety assessment notice appeared on my door at dawn, claiming my foundation had been compromised by unauthorized excavation. The unauthorized excavation, a 3 by 6 foot vegetable plot where I'd been growing tomatoes and basil. Dorothy burst through my back door like a silver-haired missile, still in her bathrobe. Xavier, she's completely lost it. She's claiming my bird feeders are biohazard attractions that spread disease. Animal control is supposed to come today. Constance was carpet bombing the entire neighborhood simultaneously, hitting every family at once like she was trying to create mass exodus before something, or someone, could stop her. Her timing revealed everything. She knew the walls were closing in. What she didn't know was exactly how close. 7 houses closed. 2 more scheduled for Friday. Mrs. Patterson, bless her soul, had agreed to sell after Constance tried citing her for excessive memorial wind chime noise pollution 6 months after her husband's funeral. I'm done being terrorized by that monster, Carol Patterson had whispered during our secret coffee meeting. Buy my house, burn down her empire, whatever it takes. Constance's harassment escalation was driving her final holdout neighbors directly into my arms. She thought she was pressuring everyone to accept her authority. She was gift-wrapping property sales for my shell companies. Then she deployed what she clearly believed was her nuclear option. A city utilities truck pulled up to my house, followed by her white Lexus and 3 workers carrying excavation equipment. Gas leak emergency. Need to dig up your front yard. I watched Constance directing operations from her driveway, pointing at my newly installed sprinkler system like she was targeting enemy positions. She was trying to destroy my irrigation system right before my final mortgage applications were due. Too bad for Constance. Military logistics taught me to always have backup plans for backup plans. Gas company emergency line? Someone just filed a false emergency report to get city workers onto my property. Within 20 minutes, a utility supervisor was examining work orders with the expression of someone discovering termites in their wedding cake. "Ma'am," he said, approaching Constance with professional calm barely containing volcanic fury, "who authorized emergency excavation based on this complaint? Our instruments show 0 gas traces. Filing false emergency reports is a criminal offense. False emergency reports plus documented harassment plus fraudulent HOA violations equaled a federal case that could put her away while I completed my neighborhood acquisition." Constance's last stand began with a bribery attempt disguised as a peace offering, delivered at 7 a.m. on the same Thursday morning I was scheduled to close on the final property that would give me control of her entire world. She appeared at my door, perfectly coiffed as always, but with something desperate flickering behind her eyes like a dying light bulb. "Xavier, I think we got off on the wrong foot. I'd like to make you an offer." Inside the manila envelope, a cashier's check for $15,000 and a mutual release agreement. She'd buy my house for $40,000 below market value through her brother-in-law's company. All violations would disappear. I'd sign a non-disclosure agreement preventing me from discussing our neighborhood disputes. "This is quite generous," I said, flipping through pages that read like a confession to 8 years of organized harassment. "I can make all your problems disappear," Constance continued, voice dropping to what she probably thought was a conspiratorial whisper. "The city inspections, the violation fees, even the property tax assessments. I have connections that can adjust these things in your favor." The metallic taste of pure corruption filled my mouth as I realized she was openly admitting to bribery, tax fraud, and abuse of municipal authority. My phone was recording everything from my shirt pocket. "That's very accommodating of you," I replied, setting her bribery package on my kitchen table like evidence in a murder trial. "But I think I'll pass." Constance's composure cracked. "You don't understand the forces you're dealing with here. I've been managing this neighborhood for 8 years. I know people, important people, who can make your life very difficult." What she didn't realize was that she'd just confirmed every suspicion I'd developed about her political network, and handed federal prosecutors their conspiracy evidence on a silver platter. That afternoon, while I was at the bank finalizing her mortgage debt purchase, she held an emergency HOA meeting, without notifying me, to vote on $10,000 in manufactured fines targeting my property specifically, payable immediately or face property liens. The beautiful irony. While she was busy fabricating emergency assessments, I was busy buying her house from the bank that held her mortgage. Every bogus fine she invented was being charged to someone who was about to become her landlord. Saturday morning brought the sweetest sound in real estate history, confirmation that all property purchases had closed simultaneously. 11 houses purchased through 7 different shell companies, all recorded at the county courthouse within the same hour. Sold signs appeared on every lawn except Constance's and mine. I noticed her watching from her window, face pressed against the glass like she was trying to solve a puzzle that kept changing pieces. The confusion in her expression told me she was finally connecting dots, but far too late to matter. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Wong. "Mortgage purchase complete. Foreclosure proceedings filed. Eviction notice ready for service." Monday evening. The annual HOA meeting. The community center filled like a courtroom for a high-profile trial. All 12 Maple Ridge families, neighbors from adjacent streets, the mayor's representative, a sheriff's deputy, and 2 reporters from the local newspaper. Constance had arranged everything like a judge preparing to deliver a death sentence. She'd prepared a 20-minute PowerPoint presentation about my pattern of violations and coordinated resistance to lawful community authority. "This individual," she declared, clicking to a slide showing my truck and house, "represents everything wrong with today's society. No respect for rules, no consideration for neighbors, no understanding of the standards that make our community special." The room murmured agreement. Margaret actually applauded. Constance's smile grew wider as she sensed victory approaching like a freight train. "Therefore, I motion that this board exercise its emergency authority to impose immediate sanctions, including property liens and potential legal action to remove this disruptive element from our neighborhood." That's when I stood up from the back row, briefcase in hand, and walked slowly toward the front. "Point of order," I said, my voice cutting through the murmur like a blade through silk. "Before we discuss HOA authority, shouldn't we establish exactly who this board represents?" Constance's confident expression flickered like a candle in a hurricane. I reached the head table and opened my briefcase. I spread 11 property deeds across Constance's presentation table like playing cards in the world's most expensive poker game. "Ladies and gentlemen, I own every house on Maple Ridge Drive. Except one." The gasps were audible. Margaret's mouth fell open like a broken gate. The mayor's representative leaned forward, studying the documents with growing amazement. "These deeds show that Ridge Investment Holdings, Maple Street Properties, Drive Development Corporation, and 4 other companies have purchased every available property in this neighborhood over the past 3 weeks. All companies owned by the same person." I turned to face Constance, whose face had gone from confident pink to ghost white. "Me? That's impossible," she whispered, but her voice cracked like thin ice. "Furthermore," I continued, pulling out a second folder, "I've also purchased the mortgage debt on the one remaining property from First National Bank. The Blackwell residence at 1298 Maple Ridge Drive is now in foreclosure proceedings." Constance's legs gave out. She collapsed into her folding chair like someone had cut her strings, staring at the foreclosure notice I placed in front of her. "This means," I announced to the stunned crowd, "that as of this morning, I own or control every single property this HOA claims to represent. Which makes the previous 8 years of harassment, fraudulent violations, and manufactured crises particularly interesting." The room erupted. Neighbors talking over each other. Reporters scribbling frantically. The mayor's representative requesting copies of everything. Through the chaos, I could hear the sweetest sound in the universe: Constance Blackwell's world collapsing like a house of cards in a tornado. "Ladies and gentlemen, the old management is hereby terminated. Anyone interested in discussing reasonable HOA policies that actually serve the community can stay for coffee and actual democratic discussion." As people surged forward to examine the deeds, I noticed Constance stumbling toward the exit, her perfect composure finally shattered. "Constance," I called after her. "Don't forget, you have 30 days to vacate. Eviction papers will be served tomorrow morning." The transformation of Maple Ridge Drive began within hours. By Tuesday morning, neighbors who hadn't spoken in years were gathering on front lawns sharing coffee and stories about 8 years of manufactured misery. Half the neighborhood stopped by to celebrate what people were calling Liberation Day. Constance had fled without a word, leaving only unpaid bills and a forwarding address in another state. The criminal investigation would continue. Wire fraud charges don't disappear because you change your zip code. The new HOA emerged through actual democracy. Monthly dues dropped from $200 to $50, covering only essential maintenance. Violation notices became friendly reminders. Fines were abolished entirely, replaced by community work days where neighbors solved problems together. Mrs. Patterson planted a memorial garden where Constance's phantom common area used to exist. The Henderson kids resumed basketball games without fear of noise citations. Even Margaret, Constance's former enforcer, apologized for years of enabling harassment and volunteered to organize the first annual Maple Ridge Block Party in over a decade. HOA bank accounts revealed $15,000 in misappropriated funds, redistributed as property improvement credits for families who'd been overcharged. The Martinez house became affordable housing for young families, rented below market rate to ensure economic diversity in the community that had once destroyed the Martinez family financially. 6 months later, the Neighborhood Justice Scholarship launched, funded by rental income and designed to help families fight HOA abuse in other communities. We partnered with the State Attorney General's office to identify corrupt HOA boards and provide legal resources for victims who felt powerless. Within a year, our story had sparked a national movement, congressional hearings about HOA accountability, state legislation requiring financial transparency, documentary crews calling it the most expensive neighborhood coup in American history. Constance Blackwell pleaded guilty to wire fraud and conspiracy charges, receiving 3 years probation and full restitution to her victims. She's now prohibited from serving on any HOA board and required to complete community service helping seniors with home maintenance. Perhaps the most poetic justice imaginable. 18 months later, property values across our neighborhood have increased 15%. Noise complaints have dropped to 0. The annual block party draws families from 6 surrounding streets. Every morning I drink coffee on the same front porch where this story began, watching children play freely while their parents chat without fear. Dorothy's bird feeders attract more cardinals than ever, and nobody's measuring grass height or counting rose petals. People always say don't poke the bear. They rarely mention what happens when you accidentally poke a retired logistics officer. Someone who spent 20 years moving military equipment through hostile territory and simply redirected those same skills toward moving $2.8 million through suburban real estate markets. For Constance, that was just Tuesday morning. Here's what kept me up at night then and still does now. How many other Constances are out there doing this exact same thing right now? How many families are being harassed into selling their homes below market value? How many people are paying HOA fees that fund someone else's vacation property and BMW lease? Before you pay your next HOA fee, request the full financial records. They are legally yours. Read every line. Compare what's being collected against what's actually being spent. Because the Constance Blackwells of the world are counting on you being too busy, too intimidated, or too trusting to look. Drop a comment if you're dealing with something similar or if you've ever won a battle against your HOA. I read every single one. If you think Xavier handled this right, hit like. Subscribe to the HOA Files for more stories about regular people who refuse to be pushed around. And share this with anyone you know dealing with an HOA nightmare. Because sometimes the best way to beat a bully is to buy their house. The HOA Files, because somebody has to hold them accountable.